Chairman, we are now live.
Okay, evening everybody, and welcome to the executive meeting on Thursday, the 2nd of November 2023. I'm Councillor Lee Dillon, the leader of West Berkshire Council, and this meeting is also live streamed. We have dialing in from home Councillor Ross McKinnon, leader of the opposition. Welcome, Ross, and then we have other members in attendance around the room. Before we start the formal business, I just have a few announcements to make. The first is to welcome Anne-Marie Dodds into position as our new Executive Director, People for Children and Family Services. Welcome, Anne-Marie. And then the second issue that I'd like to raise, if I could just have your indulgence, is if I could ask all members here and members of the public if we could stand shortly just to observe a moment's silence for David and Celia Barlow, who were murdered in a terrorist attack at the Queen Elizabeth National Park in Uganda whilst celebrating their honeymoon. Celia was an experienced senior businesswoman, and David ran a local family timber yard whilst also serving the local community as the chair of Hampstead Norris Parish Council. I know their loss has and will continue to be felt by the local community, and I'm sure all of us here send our best wishes to their family and friends. So if we could all just please rise for a moment's silence. Thank you, everybody. Okay, and then the final announcement. Some of you may have spotted that Councillor Abbs is no longer sat on the left-hand side of the chamber, but is now an independent councillor. Just to put on record our thanks to Adrian for his work on our front bench for the last 4.5 years. We appreciate the effort that you put in, Adrian. And of course, we welcome Stuart Gawley onto the front bench to take over the reins of driving forward the great work that Adrian had started. So thank you. Okay, item 1 is apologies, please.
We have apologies from Councillors Richard Sumner and Joe Stewart.
And good reasons, I understand, for that. And we wish them the best. Item 2 is minutes, pages 9 to 16 in your pack. Does anyone have any comments or questions on the minutes? Councillor Bowick.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. It's on page 11. It mentions, from my scribbled notes here, all of panel workers in respect of the item about recruitment. I don't know what off-panel workers means.
Okay, so we have a contract with a I never can remember to say the word commensurate, where most of our recruitment goes through, but there are some roles that aren't in that contract, so then they're off that panel. So that's what it's referenced.
Bit jargony, isn't it?
A little bit, but an accurate description of what it is. Okay. But yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on the papers? No. Okay. So I will propose those from the chair. Heather's seconded those, thank you. And all exec members in favour, please. Excellent, thank you. We'll sign those off. Okay, item 3 is declarations of interest. So, Madam Clerk, do we have any?
None received.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving on then to item 4, which is public questions. So we have Mr. Goatley and Mr. Pearce present. We are expecting Mr. Morgan in the room as well. And we have had one question, question G, which has now been withdrawn. So I'd like to thank members of the public who have submitted questions for this evening's exec. Your question will appear on the screen and be answered by the relevant portfolio holder. You'll then be given the opportunity to ask a supplementary question, but please remember that it must be to clarify the response provided and not to introduce any new business. In accordance with the Constitution, where questions have more than one question, only their first will be answered. If after all first questions have been asked and answered and there's sufficient time, we will allow subsequent questions. So can I go to question A, please, which is from Mr. John Goatley and to be answered by Councillor Martin Colston.
Evening, Ms. Goatley. Thank you for your question. So the regeneration programme for the site falls under the remit of the council as landowner because it concerns strategic plans for council-owned assets. The new administration is reviewing the goals of the programme with officers, and we're aiming to have these finalised in a report to the executive in the next few months. And you'll see then what the differences are between this administration's plans and the previous one. Do you have a supplementary?
Not really, because you haven't got any change, have you?
You'll see it when we have published the updated report, which will be soon.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Goatley. So question B is by Mr. Alan Pearce, again to be answered by Councillor Colston, please.
Evening, Ms. Pearce. Thank you for your question. So the report was postponed to allow time for members to consider this programme review that I just mentioned to Mr. Goatley, and which the new administration wanted to put in place. And we're now aiming to have the decision in the next few months.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you for your answer. Can I have a supplementary?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. You've obviously been involved in meetings regarding where this review is going to go. Are you looking at developing the estate in a more holistic approach going forward?
Well, that's part of our review now. So I'll be able to answer that when that's published.
Okay, thank you for your answer.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have Mr. Morgan on Zoom yet? If not, I'll come back to him.
Mr. Morgan is now in the room.
Lovely. So we'll just wait for... So, Mr. Morgan, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Lovely. So, Mr. Morgan, your questions to be answered by Councillor Lewis.
Okay, good evening, Mr. Morgan. Thank you for your question. And the answer is the leisure contract was signed on the 30th of June 2023. Do you have a supplementary?
No, I did put one question in. I noticed you split the questions into I, K, and L. So on this point, no, I don't. But thank you for that. I guess I'll get to the other points when the questions are raised. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Mr. Morgan. We move on to question D. Again, Mr. Goatley to be answered by Councillor Colston, please.
Hello again. Thank you for this question. So my answer is yes. I think they are. Our plans are now being refined through the programme review that's currently underway, which I mentioned just before. Bond Riverside's got a number of intrinsic advantages as a site. It's right on the edge of the town centre. It's well connected to pedestrian, cycle and public transport links. And these factors, along with careful investment in the placemaking of the site and a clear strategic commitment from the council to a commercial-led regeneration, we think will make it an attractive location for private investment. Do you have any supplementaries?
Yes, thank you for that answer. Would you agree, though, it has a massive Achilles heel in that drainage will fall foul of every plan you put forward unless it's holistic and sorted out properly? It's scuppered the previous administration. It will scupper yours if it's not looked at. Is that a fair statement?
I don't think it will scupper the plans. We're reviewing our proposals, and you'll see what they are and how we plan to move that item forward.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Question E is Mr. Pearce to be answered by Councillor Vickers, please.
Thank you, Mr. Pearce. Yes, the council is being fully transparent with regards planning for the new facilities at Faraday Road.
The recreational land use at Faraday Road has remained unchanged since it was last used for football. The planning balance, however, potentially changes every time the national planning policy framework changes or there is a new ministerial statement, and that happens quite a lot. This will be tested at the point of a proposal for planning permission coming forward and being determined. It will, of course, also depend on what the local development plan says at that time. The new Liberal Democrat administration is looking closely at whether, and if so, how it might wish to change what the submitted new plan says about London Road Industrial Estate and other district-wide policies. And as you know, we're largely in the hand of the independent planning inspector now, although as opposition, our position on this was quite clear and is in the public domain.
Thank you for your answer. It's quite comprehensive, quite a long answer. It's difficult for me to pick out specific bits of that. But one bit you said there hasn't been a specific change to use. Well, yes, it has. It was a fully functioning stadium with floodlights, clubhouse and everything else. Now it's just a bookable pitch. It's likely to be a bookable pitch for the next, well, we don't know how long, because look at the London Road Industrial Estate, it keeps on getting postponed. So I don't think you can say the planning balance is not going to be altered, because you've now got a bookable pitch for 10 years rather than a fully functional stadium. So that's why I'm saying, are you being transparent to the public? So there's no supplementary question. I brought it to the public's attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Pierce. Thank you. Question F, we've got Mr. Morgan. Can we keep Mr. Morgan in the room? And then Mr. Morgan can just be on mute between questions. So, Mr. Morgan, here he comes. Oh.
Hello. Yeah, I'm back again.
And thank you, Mr. Morgan. So question F to be answered by Councillor Lewis, please.
Good evening, Mr. Morgan again.
Hello
So I'm
again.
going to answer the questions as you had written them with the references. So the paper included actual costs associated with the Sports Hub project, and there has been no spend in relation to points A, B, C and D. Point E, it's not possible to accurately reflect the cost of the interim consultant's time in relation to the Sports Hub project, as the officer was working on multiple projects and tasks, not just the Sports Hub. Item F, legal officer costs have been included for the judicial review and the Sports Hub costs as part of legal costs set out in the report. Again, it's not possible to accurately reflect the time other officers have spent on the Sports Hub project specifically. Item G, there are no current plans to develop a pitch at Manor Park. Item H, 0, as no loan has been undertaken to finance capital items in regard to this project. Item I, no additional revenue funding to that already specified in the leisure contract. J, on the assumption that the Sports Hub doesn't go ahead, there will be no lease payments to Newbury Club. We assume this point refers to the Newbury Rugby Club. Do you have any supplementaries?
Yes, can you hear me okay? I don't know if you've looked in your inbox at the moment, Councillor Lewis, but I have written to yourself, Mr. Lynn, Mr. Holmes and all the members of the executive. What I find frustrating, and I guess this is a continuing point I keep making, is I can't understand why the council does not provide fully costed business cases and cost of ownership. I've written to you on that matter.
So, Mr. Morgan, is that the supplementary?
My supplementary is why can you not, as a council, provide fully costed business cases so that the public and the members can make informed decisions? Without that, bad decisions are made.
Okay,
so the question is why can you not, as a council, come up with fully costed business case that everyone can understand, including the member? That's my question.
Yeah, thank you.
So that's already been responded to. It's not always easy to cut it down into the fine numbers that you need, because people spend time looking at other projects.
Okay. But you'll be pleased to know I've done that for you, Councillor Lewis.
And then I wonder as well, Mr. Morgan, if it's because that was quite a detailed answer.
Yeah.
If we send that to you in writing as well, so you've got those financial breakdowns that Councillor
I
Lewis.
appreciate that, but can I ask you to look at the document I sent you in response as well? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks very much.
Okay, so we move on to question H, which is Mr. Pearce, to be answered by Councillor Lewis. You've got the next run, Councillor Lewis.
So thank you again, Mr. Pearce. The simple answer for the question is yes. Do you have a supplementary?
Sorry, Mr. Pearce, if you could do the mic so people at home can hear as well. Thanks.
Could I ask you to confirm what the number one priority of the pitch playing strategy is then, please? What is?
Now, at the moment, that's going forward for the review E. The consultants will be feeding back their information in due course. So until that, we can't specify what the priorities are.
Just to confirm then, so the review is the new 3G facility at Monks Lane Sports Hub, which is parts and mitigation, will be an additional grass pitch at Manor Park. So in other words, what I'm saying is at the moment, Monks Lane is a replacement for Faraday Road.
And the answer is going to be everything for the pitches are going to be reviewed by the consultants, and that will be reported back accordingly.
When, so I know that's another question, but when will that be?
Sorry, Mr. We haven't got a definite timescale yet. When we have, we'll share that with you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. If we go back to Zoom and to Mr. Morgan, please, Councillor Lewis, for question I.
So thank you again, Mr. Morgan. The leisure contract was awarded on a flat fee, and that flat fee goes across 10 years, and the total value for it is 1.5 million. And whilst indicative costs for running the sports hub were submitted as part of the procurement exercise, these are deemed as commercially sensitive, so they cannot be provided. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. Councillor Wollaston, when I asked the same question back in March, actually did confirm that I will provide the full visibility of that. Why are you not providing that?
So again, the answer is commercial sensitivity. We can't advise you on that.
Thank you. So, sorry, Mr. Morgan, that was the supplementary question on that one, I'm afraid.
Well, again, you haven't answered again, I'm afraid.
We've got you. Well, it was because of commercial sensitivity is why we're not sharing it. So we move on to question J, which is Mr. Pearce, to be answered by Councillor Lewis, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Pearce. Again, this is a long one to read out, and I will provide that to you in writing. So the tender documents for the procurement of the leisure management contract were advertised on the 21st of April 2022. Those documents included a specification where the proposals for the sports hub facility and its management were set out, and bidders submitted their bids on that basis. The leisure management contract terms include a mechanism to remove up to 4 facilities over the lifetime of the contract, and therefore it was always possible to invoke that mechanism in respect of the sports hub should that prove necessary. The leisure management contract award was approved at the 23rd of March 2023 executive. At the time of the call-in of the sports hub, the leisure and legal teams were focused on the preparation of a final version of the leisure management contract to ensure that mobilisation activities were in place ready for the 1st of July 2023 commencement. The removal of the sports hub facility at this stage would have been premature, given that no decision of the executive had been made regarding the future of the sports hub. Do you have a supplementary?
Thank you for that answer. These are very long answers and very difficult for members of the public to pick out what they're trying to say. But I will ask a supplementary if I may. I mean, was it not a mistake that the Lib Stems didn't call in EX4221 because it included the sports hub? You know, the opportunity then as the opposition to call that in wasn't taken. Was that a mistake?
Councillor Lewis wasn't a member of the opposition or at the time, but as Councillor Lewis said in her original statement, the contract does allow for variations within it. So it still allowed us to fulfil our wishes as administration while making sure that contract was in place, so things like the Lido opening could get underway and happen according to schedule. So no, it wasn't a mistake.
Thank you both for your answer. Thank you.
Okay, and then back to Zoom for Mr. Morgan. Answer question K, please, Councillor Lewis.
Okay, thank you again, Mr. Morgan. The leisure management contract, which included the operation of the sports hub, was awarded on a flat fee across the 10 years. And whilst indicative costs for income related to the sports hub were submitted as part of the procurement exercise, these are deemed as commercially sensitive, so cannot be provided.
Yeah.
Do you have a supplement?
Yeah, and again, it's very so frustrating. You're not answering questions again. It's the whole culture of secrecy is still alive and kicking with the new administration, which is very unfortunate. Again, all I will say, don't bother answering question now, Councillor, because it's going to be the same stuff. But all I can say is urge you and the rest of the team to read the document sent through, because it really does need to come to the public attention what's been happening. That's all I've got to say. I'm disappointed again, but thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. And then on your advice, we'll remove question L.
Because you're not answering it, that's why. It's a waste of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Thank you. So we'll move on. That concludes public questions. We'll move on to item 5, petitions. Madam Clerk.
No petitions received, Leader.
Thank you very much. So moving on then to item 6, the new procurement strategy for 23-27. Councillor Brooks.
Happy to propose. And do you want to introduce it? I'll look for a seconder, sir.
Yeah, I'm happy to second that one from the chair.
Thank you very much. I'll introduce the item then. Clearly, strategies need to be in place for critical services. I've been pleased with what I've seen of the commissioning and procurement department since May. It's got a strong capability, and I'm pleased to see that, given it was several years ago I was grumbling about I didn't think it was strong. So that has turned around. What I look for in a strategy is how effective it is in terms of its users. And users in this case are people who wish to bid for work to this council. I look out for SMEs, small, medium enterprises, and within our social value policy, there clearly is a lot for them there to be able to engage and bid against our services. So that, I think, is nicely covered off. You notice in the report there is some important training coming through in contract management training, and I welcome that. And I think this is certainly fit for purpose, sir, and commend it to the executive.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions from executive members? No. So just a comment from myself, just around the social value aspect. So I think we've also said about putting case studies in there to really bring it to life, because you think, you know, if we want to be able to use local services, small, medium enterprises, and actually for them answering, well, what can I do around social value, that they might struggle to come up with some ideas. So we want to create some case studies as well, so that they really understand the nuance of that question and how they can help make a difference in West Berkshire. I'm
grateful for that, Leader. And in another life, I also help businesses bid to public sector. And only today I was talking to a company and saying, you're going to need to evidence social value. And this company probably turns over about £10 million and said, well, what's that all about? So, case in point.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Has Councillor McKinnon got his hat? He has. Excellent. Come to you first, please, Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you, Leader. Thanks very much. Now, Councillor Brooks, I mean, if you were to show this report to a member of the public, I'm not sure they would have a great deal of understanding of what we're doing here. You know, there's lots of definitions on commissioning, how it differs from procurement, etc. But it doesn't tell me how much this strategy will save. It's very high level. You know, the practicalities of how it will work, what it will save, how it will improve matters. For me, it's not really in this paper. I think 99 out of 100 people might say, what's this all about? Would you agree?
Well, fascinating, isn't it? I think that's a mirror image of what I've been saying about your strategies for so many years, Councillor McKinnon, when you were in administration. And it's certainly, we will bring it to life, having got the high-level documents in the ways you're describing.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. And one more, Leader, if I may. It does seem very light. I mean, after all the definitions, we've got a section on how skilled our staff are, which is great to hear. But then under priorities, actions and implementation, all we have is we'll continue to work with service areas, continue to work with, to develop category plans and pipelines, and then work will be carried out to monitor spend to ensure compliance. I mean, that's not really a strategy, is it? It's a post-it note.
Well, that's your point of view. Work will be carried out because we're monitoring this all the time. I attend the procurement board regularly, and so in flight, this guides us, as you know, a strategy must do. And not so long ago, you were in charge of this, and I remember you telling us it was a very good service. I think it still is, and this helps it continue to be so.
Thanks, Councillor Brooks. Thanks, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor McKinnon. I saw then Councillor Marsh hasn't got any questions, so Councillor Abbs and then Councillor Culver, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Leader. Not so much a question as I hope that you will accept the amendment, because I can't really do one with from where I'm currently sitting. But we did successfully add biodiversity to the climate declaration. And as this document is following quite closely, I would like to see biodiversity reflected in the social value element of the document. It should be pretty easy to add in. You know, the word biodiversity twice would do it. I did send you all, or the executive, a copy of that. Be nice to see you all nodding. I can see Stuart nodding, but thank you very much. That's it, really.
I don't have a problem with that. I think it goes in the social value aspect of this. It doesn't stop us, in my view, agreeing the strategy this evening, Leader, but I take that on board.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Abbs. Councillor Culver.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Thank you for the document. In the section about category management, it talks about how there is good progress in some of the high spending corporate areas. Is it possible to give us an example of where you think that good progress is being made? And then I just wanted to make a second point, if I may, about the performance management as well. I'm very conscious that some of the contracts we've got at the moment, members of the public are not very happy with. So I think it's Continental who collect the bins, for example. I've had examples in my ward where there was a van that went to collect bins and it was spotted on CCTV. The guy sat in the van, didn't even get out and empty the bins. And some of the parish councils are now asking to pull out of that contract. And I'm also conscious there have been complaints about Everyone Active, which I've shared with Councillor Lewis as well. And obviously it's early days for that. So the question about the good progress, but also just to raise the issue about performance management, I think that is really, really important. You know, whether or not we're going and doing mystery shopping and that kind of thing, just to check that those things are bedding in properly. Thank you.
Well, that sort of thing is done within the departments. It will get fed back to commissioning and procurement. So as they monitor performance, that is gathered, and we rely on the departments to feed that sort of performance issues back, so it can roll up into contract review. You mentioned category management, and is there an example? And of course, Leader, you're only going to give me a minute or two on the management of temporary workers, but that is an example of where category management is saying, with the help of members, how do we bear down on those costs through the commissioning process? The day-to-day purchasing of temporary workers, as you know, I bang on about that should go through the commensurate channel. But the general philosophy of that category management is our commissioning procurement officers become skilled in a particular area rather than being more generalist. And so I commend that for that reason, and I hope my example is of value.
Thanks. And then I'd just add, Councillor Culver, so with the Everyone Active, myself and Councillor Lewis met with their management team, I think it was last week, to review the first few months of the contract. So, you know, we were aware of some of those snagging issues sort of thing when the contract first rolled out, and had got confidence from them when we met them that they appreciated that and were focused on improving that going forward. And then the only other one says that if there's an area of concern on performance of a contract, then let's scrutinise it as well at the scrutiny committee. You know, and we'd support you calling those contracts in to have a look at.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions from any other members? No. Okay, so that's been proposed and seconded. So it's to adopt the strategy subject to adding biodiversity into the social value section. Yeah, so can I see executive members in favour, please? Thank you, that's unanimous. Okay, we move on then to item 8, which is the review of the Newbury Sports Hub development, pages 83 to 156 in your packs. Oh, sorry, I was writing the names in the wrong place. Sorry, item 7 is the Environment Strategy Annual Progress Report. please note that the report's been incorrectly marked as to note, but recommendations within 2B do need to be approved, so there will be a vote of executive members. And I welcome Stuart in his capacity as the executive portfolio holder for the first time to introduce a paper.
Nice, gentle warm up, I think. Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I just wanted to second your comments, Leader, with regards to the work and the dedication that Councillor Abbs has put into the portfolio over the last 4.5 years. So in terms of my introduction to the report, I think, the climate change and the ecological emergencies continue to be one of the biggest challenges that we are facing, both globally and nationally, with the effects being seen and felt locally as perhaps we have seen today. With regards to the report itself, a good progress is being made across the council on both our delivery plan and our target of reaching net zero as a council by 2030. With a change in administration in May 2023, there's been a renewed focus and ambition in how we approach these key topics and strengthen our resolve to hit those targets that we have set for our new council strategy. Looking forward, I think there are some key highlights to pull out, which are also in the recommendations. We've been able to upgrade the original climate emergency declaration to include that of the ecological emergency, and we'll be updating the strategy delivery plan to reflect that. We are introducing a new sustainability impact assessment tool to help with decision making and project planning, and also the development of a green and blue infrastructure framework to highlight how we manage and enhance the natural and local environment for the benefits of nature and people. I'd also like to take the opportunity to acknowledge the continued great work from officers focusing on the initiatives that are in the planning phase, such as the solar farm at Graiseley, and also ensuring we get solar on our suitable council assets. And there's also the introduction of the biodiversity net gain legislation, which is due in early 2024, and the continued rollout of the electric charging points, which continue to keep the council and officers busy. And, we as a council need to ensure that we lead the way on fighting these issues over the coming months and years. But one thing is also sure, and that is that we can't do it alone. By working together and building strong relationships and partnerships and sharing best practice, we can all continue to be successful together. I attended the Parish Climate Forum yesterday, and it was great to see so many people on there. And I continue to be humbled and inspired by the great work that individuals, parish and town councils, groups and communities are doing to help deliver a greener and cleaner West Berkshire. I think certainly as I move into this role, I'm keen to continue the listening and the receiving of ideas and improvements and feedback on how we approach and mitigate climate change. And I look forward to continue engaging with wider stakeholders across West Berks in the shape of businesses, parish and town councils, organisations and landowners to continue to improve our district to make West Berkshire a cleaner and greener, more prosperous and resilient place to live, work and play. And I'd like to finish my introduction with a quote from that stuck with me over my time from Barack Obama. And I think it's more pertinent now more than ever as I move into this critical portfolio, and that is that we are the first generation to feel the impact of climate change, and we're the last generation that can do something about it. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
So Councillor Gawley, if you can just propose that formally for me after an eloquent introduction.
I'm happy to propose that.
Lovely, thank you. And do I see a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Colston.
Thank you.
Members of the executive, any comments or questions? No, thank you. Councillor McKinnon, do you have your hand up? He does. Councillor McKinnon, please.
Thank you. Congratulations, Councillor Gurley, on your appointment, and commiserations to your diary. I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you.
So, and thank you for the quote from President Obama. I don't have such a lofty quote to give you. Instead, I've got a few questions. So we have the ecological emergency, which was declared last month, despite there not being really evidence that it exists in West Berkshire, but there we go. Quick fire one for you first off, Councillor Gurley. Of those recommendations in 2B of the report, how many of those are actually already happening and how many of them are new?
So there is a new one, obviously, around the ecological emergency that we will be reviewing the delivery plan for that. So that one is a new one. The others that are there, I believe, a lot of them are already in progress or being updated, but I will need to confirm on which ones those are.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, On the strategy, well, in page 2, sorry, not the strategy, I beg your pardon, on the progress report file itself. So on page 2, am I looking at the most up-to-date one? But I've just got a big space there that says text to follow. It's got your smiling face in the middle of it, but what text is to follow, and is it important? Because if the executive are going to vote on this, then they should really know what they're voting on.
Yeah, so that is my forward that I have written and submitted this afternoon.
Okay, but have the executive read it?
So I'll be completely frank, what I've just talked you through is my forward. So my introduction is effectively the forward that I've got.
Okay, because I know that one of your colleagues voted on something he said he hadn't read at council last month, and I hope that practice isn't going to spread amongst the rest of the executive. On page 6, I love figure 1. And I love the appendix as well, because it shows the achievements to date, which of course is the purpose of this report. And I know it was nice to hear you pay tribute to officers, but I'm sure it was an oversight on your part. But I'd also pay tribute to Steve Ardell-Walter and to Lynn Docherty for their leadership and progress in delivering such an outstanding performance so far. Final question for you, Councillor Gurley, on page 9 of the report itself. It's under the healthy communities section. At the top in big bold print tells us that 16% of the actions are complete and 88% are in progress or on track. That adds up to 104%. So can you explain that one to me, please?
No, I can't, but I will ask that at my briefing tomorrow and follow up with officers.
Thank you, and congratulations again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McKinnon, for your questions. Come to Councillor Bowick next, please, as the Deputy Leader of the Opposition, and then Councillor Marsh and Councillor Abbs.
Thank you, Leader, and congratulations, Councillor Gurley, on your elevation and on this report, which I echo Councillor McKinnon's praise for much of it.
Echo Councillor McKinnon's praise for much of it. I have a few questions. Paragraph 4.5 in the executive summary. I hope I'm looking at the same version as everybody else. It says relevant for operations board only, and then talks about the version in your report in your pack. Does everybody else have that, or is it just me?
No, it's in the public pack, Councillor
What's it
Bowick.
doing there is, I guess, is my question. What does it say?
I think, Claire, are you able to help with that one? So 4.5 in the executive report. I think it's an editing issue. I think you probably have seen that paragraph in ops papers in previous administrations, I'd imagine.
Okay.
We'll wait for the officer to give you the proper answer, Councillor Bowick. Councillor Holmes? Sorry. Joseph Holmes.
Congratulations, Joseph. Welcome to the party.
A councillor at the last exec, and now I'm promoting officers to councillors.
I take it as a promotion.
He has an ambition.
So I'm just saying that is purely just a formatting thing. So it's purely just saying formatting. It needs to drop out. So we'll make that amend.
Lovely. Thanks for bringing that to our attention. Any other questions, Councillor Bowick?
Yes, and 5.5, a question for understanding, where it talks about examples utilising the low carbon skills fund, plans to be made for decarbonising figures for schools and a leisure with high emissions. It means nothing to me.
Yeah, that looks like a mistype that's supposed to be leisure centre, possibly, but I will check with the author of the report.
Yeah, and while we're on the theme, that just in general, Leader, this whole agenda is riddled with formatting and errors that would have been picked out by some diligent proofreading and attention by, I hazard to say, executive members. For example, further on where we're talking about it's item 10, where the front the heading of the paper refers to the executive board. Well, there's no executive board. Contracts for award under delegated authority from executive board. Is nobody reading these papers?
They're reading them. I think the substantive content is correct, and I appreciate you picking up some typos for us. You know, they will be taken on board by the officers and will be edited out. So thank you. Once they're published, they're published. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Spirit of Councillor Bridgman over here.
Yes.
But it serves a function. You know, we need to present a professional face to our residents.
And I appreciate that. And I said, I think the officers will take on board the need for typos to be removed from the reports.
More substantive questions.
Please do, yeah.
Thank you. This is the document. The report talks about the recovery, nature recovery, and I want to know from what to what. So what are we recovering from, and when we've recovered, what will it look like? There's nothing about that here, Councillor Gowley.
No, that's good feedback to take away. And
no, but what's the answer then?
Well, I don't have the answer to hand at the moment. You know, I know that we are working on that local nature recovery strategy across multiple areas, and multiple councils are involved in that. But that is still a work in progress.
But we should have our own strategy that's not dependent upon other authorities.
So within the recommendations, Councillor, but under 5.8, it says work with local authorities and other partners in development of a local nature strategy for Berkshire, ensuring the opportunities for biodiversity protection and recovery in West Berkshire are maximised. I'm sure you'd appreciate that the borders don't stop where the trees grow or where the field runs to. So I mean, so it will always be a partnership approach to that.
I completely get that, but I'll echo the point that Councillor McKinnon mentioned earlier on when talking about the ecological climate that's been declared. What does it mean for us? Well, what's the situation here in West Berkshire? Because our ecology is very different, say, from Maidenhead and Windsor, you know, and Slough, very different. So we need a West Berkshire strategy.
So the first step is that the Royal Borough of Windsor is leading on this for Berkshire as a whole. And the first part of that is to get the baseline of where we are now, and then we can start to plan those objectives around it. But they are the lead authority, and we will obviously have our input on that.
Do you mean the baseline here in West Berkshire? The West Berkshire baseline?
Across Berkshire.
Oh, that's disappointing.
Really closely with towns, parish councils and the group.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sure you'll be able to come back to me with.
Okay. Any other questions, Councillor?
Yes, just one last one.
Thank you.
Last one.
No worries.
I don't know what. I'm saying I don't know a lot of things here today. I don't know what green and blue infrastructure framework is.
So green and blue infrastructure is things like our rivers and our green open spaces. So it is around putting a framework in around how we look at those as assets and how we manage those and ensure that they are best involved, kind of best maintained and kept alive and well with good biodiversity, and bearing in mind things like the climate emergency and the ecological emergency that we have.
Thank you.
Thank you. It might be as in terms of in the proofreading, if there are terminologies that a member doesn't understand, is to maybe ask officers before the meeting. I think it's an established term within environment strategies is the green and blue infrastructure. Lovely, thanks. Councillor Marsh, please.
Thank you, Chair. Well, we'd like to welcome Councillor Gawley to this role as well. I would wonder if he will join me in recommending Councillor McKinnon and Councillor Bowick to read the State of Nature report that was produced by Natural England only last month, revealing that or confirming that 1 in 6 species in the UK are threatened with extinction. Every single conservation charity, every single organisation working in the field, from the National Trust to the RSPB to the Wildlife Trust, including our own local Wildlife Trust, all agree that nature is in crisis. And to suggest that somehow West Berkshire is as mysteriously exempt from this crisis is absurd. and you know it is. So welcome, and it's great to, from our point of view as Greens, to have an administration that is taking what I've just said seriously. We do think the emphasis on biodiversity and nature recovery is very welcome in this document, and we very much work, as we're involved with, as others are, with various local groups. It's great to see the bit about working with residents and campaign groups to encourage action for nature. Only yesterday, I accompanied the Berkshire project officer for the Newt Conservation Partnership in a big field somewhere in the countryside, not far from my ward, where they dug 2 huge ponds, which are going to be filled with great crested newts and endangered species here in West Berkshire, as in the rest of the country, by next spring, with any luck. It's a great project and it's connected. And another one, just to mention, because you're new in the role, you may not be aware of this, but Friends of the Earth in Newbury have come up with a fantastic scheme for a 2-mile nature corridor linking the various lockdown woods, from starting in Wash Common and finishing up in Goldwell Park. And this will involve the community, the schools. It's a fantastic project, which I hope that you will support and that the council will support. Just one quibble, though. The report quite rightly talks about active travel and the emphasis on buses and cycling. There doesn't seem to be, I can't find any mention at all of the plan that was in your manifesto and ours to extend traffic-free periods in the town centres, particularly Newbury. It would be disappointing that just because the Prime Minister imagines that there's a war on motorists, that you quietly drop this scheme. So can we be assured that this, which will make a significant part of the strategy, I would have thought that is going to happen.
Yep, absolutely. It's, it was in our manifesto and it's something that we committed to do.
I think, Councillor Marsh, it might appear in a transport plan rather than the environment plan, but I mean, as you said, the key is getting it done, not which strategy it sits in.
Good, thank you.
Okay, we move to Councillor Abbs, please, and then Councillor Culver.
Yeah, thank you very much, Leader. In generally, the document is obviously a backward-looking document insofar as it looks at history, it doesn't look forward. So it's really difficult to measure what the current administration has even started to do, because a lot of these things will take time to deliver. Suffice to say, when I was in opposition and had the portfolio, one of the key objectives was to go faster and bigger. And as far as I'm aware, having only just left the role, that's exactly what officers were told to do and what they're trying to get their heads around to do it in, let's face it, extremely challenging fiscal times. So it's all right saying we want to do X, but you have to find the money to do it as well. So I think we need to give the administration a little bit of largesse here in terms of giving them time to find some money to actually do some of the programs, to actually do the bigger and better. However, having said that, Stuart has a portfolio now that will in fact be generating an awful lot of cash over the next few years, because there's a lot of investor save schemes that can come out of it. So thumbs up. Very, very nice speech, by the way, as the first one, if I may say so. In terms of the report itself, so that was just, sorry for making a bit of a statement preamble. In terms of the report itself, I've made this comment behind closed doors, but I'll make it public now as well. What I'd really like to see, and some people have hinted at it, is progress. And most people can understand progress with a graph. They don't generally very good at reading numbers. Some are very good at it, but actually most of us can much easily understand the graph. So one of the things I was asking for was, can we see some more graphs, please, showing where we were? We've now got several sample points, only 3. This is the 3rd sample point that we have. So it's not really enough to be statistically important, but it starts to give us a direction as to whether we really are going to meet the 2030 goal or not. And that will enlighten us as to whether more effort needs to be made or not. I suspect more effort will need to be made. The other comment is that, of course, we're now reporting on the council's progress more than anything else, because although we, as a council, originally declared a climate declaration to net zero for the county, for the whole area, it became very apparent that hardly any of that was under the council's control. And in fact, unless the public go with us on almost all of these things that need doing, we won't get there. So I think it's right and proper to be clear with the public. We are focusing on what the council can do. And some of the green hub stuff, which is another thing that has been delivered already, at least the first phase of it, it's meant to be a pointing exercise for the public to understand what the local ecology groups and everybody's doing in the area. It's a signposting exercise to where you can start participating, doing your bit. So if I'd still had the portfolio, I certainly wouldn't have given up on a district-wide target. But reality is, it's best to be honest and say the chances of doing it, given the delay in the start of getting there, it's nearly impossible. It would require massive funding from central government. The current government is not showing any signs of handing any money over. So I think from where we're going, let's get some more graphs in there. Let's start showing the progress. It can definitely still be done. I know the Lib Dems said in their manifesto we're still interested in getting into this 2030. I think the effort is there. The officers are certainly capable of doing it. And I think now they've been given the right kind of guidance. And if I can give an example of that, there was a delivery plan, but the delivery plan didn't have any priorities on it. So straight away, well, how do you know what to deliver unless you know what to prioritize? Because if you've got no money, you do the things that the highest priority and easiest to achieve. That, as I understand it, is about to come through, and we should start to see some of that delivery plan reflected in the AG, unless something's changed, of course, the bits that we can reveal.
Okay.
So
This isn't a place for speeches, Councillor Abs. It's for, questions and debate, I'm afraid. So
well,
treat all members fairly.
then basically, that can I request, please, that we see more graphs that show us trends in next year's report.
Yeah, I'll take that away. Thank you.
Thanks. And I think what I would say in terms of, the West Berkshire Council, we need to drive that to being carbon zero. But we have a role as the council in terms of being a leader within West Berkshire and showcasing the best of technology and the costs around that so that businesses can learn from us. But also as politicians, we were meeting with Vodafone on Thursday. And one of the questions I asked them was around their energy consumption of running all of their servers. And they had a big focus on trying to reduce that energy bill. So we're doing it with soft power, and hard power where and when we can. Thank you for your comments. Councillor Culver, please.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Gawley. Congratulations from me as well on your new role, and thank you to Councillor Abs for all the work that he did as well. And I just want to take the opportunity to thank the officers as well. I'm sure that the officers would like to be even more ambitious than they are able to be, but obviously government regulations and policies hold them back somewhat. Talking of which, ambition, I'm glad that Councillor McKinnon mentioned Councillor Arderwater. I know that one of his much lauded policies was draft busters, and I still see posters for that around the area. Interestingly, I was told the other day that only 2 loft hatches have been insulated as a result of that project. So I would urge the current administration to be more ambitious to that, and I'm sure that you will be. It talks in the report about 10 sites identified to receive solar PV by the end of March 24. I just wonder, can we include care homes in that, as well as the schools and the leisure centre that's been mentioned earlier this evening? So to try and include as much of the estate as possible. I'm also interested to know when the Rural Prosperity Fund will be ready, that I think is mentioned in 5.5. Serving a rural ward, my local parish councils and businesses would be interested in that. And you also mentioned Solar Together, that 1,200 people have registered for information about that. Do we know yet how many are actually going to proceed with that project? I'm conscious I've asked you a lot of questions that you might not have the answers to tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, over to you, Councillor Gawley.
Yeah, Solar Together, I don't have the answer for, but I'm meeting with Jenny tomorrow, so I can pick that up. The Rural Prosperity Fund was actually briefed out to the parish councils yesterday, I believe, as part of the Climate Forum, if I remember correctly. There isn't a finite date on it just yet, because there's still a few bits to work through, but it will be communicated out when it is ready. Yeah, apparently subject to an individual executive member decision as well. But it's coming, it's almost there. I think there's a couple of bits that just need to be worked through. And draft busters was the other topic, wasn't it? Yes. Yeah, so I will pick that one up because I don't know much about that, if I'm completely honest, so I'll find out tomorrow. Thank you.
Okay, lovely, thank you. And we'll come back to you, Councillor Culver, on the other questions. You see why I went straight to item 8 now, can't you, a minute ago? And I skipped this item. Thank you. So this has been proposed by Councillor Gawley. No, sorry, we've already asked for comments from the exec. So it's been proposed by Councillor Gawley, seconded by Councillor Colston. Is the exec members in favour, please? Thank you, that's carried. Okay, now we're on to item 8. So review of the Newbury Sports Hub development, pages 83 to 156 in your pack. Councillor Lewis to introduce it. So if you can propose first before going to your report, Councillor Lewis.
So I'm proposing that we close the Sports Hub
That's fine.
project.
Yeah, you're just proposing the recommendations in the report.
recommendation, yeah.
Thank you. And does that find a seconder? Oh, Councillor Cottingham. Thank you. So over to you, Councillor Lewis, please.
Okay, so I'm going to keep this fairly short and sweet. We've got Stage E review coming up for the play pitch strategy, and that is going to refresh the data that we already have. So using that, we'll be able to prioritise where we can be putting in the play pitch strategy, and that could even include going up to where the sports hub was going to be. So to stop talking about the sports hub, I'm going to say that that project is now closed, but the pitch provision could still be identified as a site that we could use, and we will know that hopefully the earlier part of next year.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions from members of the executive? Remember, I won't let you back in. Sorry. Okay, Councillor McKinnon, do you have your hand up, sir?
Not yet, but I will.
I'll come to you first as leader of the opposition, sir.
That's fine. Are you going to do that every time? Because I should really, I should really anticipate that. Okay, just let me get this straight, Councillor Lewis. You're cancelling the Sports Hub, which would already have been open now, if providing a brilliant facility for 80 hours a week of use, were it not for a failed judicial review, which was encouraged and funded by Liberal Democrat council members. And instead, you're going to spend cash money installing a grass pitch at Faraday Road, which means that hundreds of jobs now can't be created at that site. And in a few years, you'll rip up that pitch that you've spent money on now and spend even more, replacing it with a new 3G stadium, which you say somehow will be cheaper than the Sports Hub. Is it just me, or is everyone taking leave of their senses?
Yeah, just you, Councillor McKinnon. I think the majority of residents in West Berkshire absolutely brought into this vision, given the election just a few months ago.
Well, Councillor Dillon, I did ask Councillor Lewis, but as you're responding, which part of what I said was untrue?
Well, you made an overall just general statement, Councillor McKinnon, rather than individuals. I mean, the cost of the new sports facility will be funded through grants. So
definitely
cost saving there to the council. We won't have a rental fee to pay to a third party at Faraday Road, so there'll be a saving there. And as Councillor Colston said in his remarks to public questions, we have an ambitious plan for Bond Riverside that will deliver the economic side to the site as well as residential.
Okay, well, I look forward to holding you to that, Leader.
I'm more than happy for you too, Councillor McKinnon. Any other questions, sir?
That's it from me.
Lovely, thank you very much. None from Councillor Bowick. Councillor Marsh first, please.
Dear. Well, I won't, let's not labour the point, but huge amount of time and money has been wasted on this project, which was misconceived from the start. So the short comment from the Green Group, and also from me as a member for the ward where the sports hub was going to be, we strongly support this report. Please end this now. As I say, it was misconceived from the off. The amount of time, the report, if anything, understates, well, I think undoubtedly understates the amount of money that the previous administration wasted on this scheme. Just think how many 3G pitches you could have paid for with the 4 million quid or so that they were going to spend on this. Luckily, most of that hasn't been spent. Quite a lot has been. Everything from the officer's time to the ridiculous scheme for cold ash to replace the replacement for Faraday Road, or not, depending on who you listen to and when you listen to them, trying to justify it. Even things like the lost revenue of bookings. 5 years Faraday Road's been closed and no one could play football there. And you'd somehow think this wasn't the responsibility of the people who closed it. I'd also like to just mention to the executive that you have a job on to undo some of the reputational damage that was done to the council, particularly by the absolutely shocking planning committee meetings of the West Area Planning Committee and the district planning committee, which were unconstitutional in various ways. And just one.
Leader, you gonna let him do that?
I'm just talking to my monitoring officer, Councillor McKinnon.
Well, I thought, okay, I withdraw that then. I thought that at the time it was said that it was, okay, it wasn't a good advertisement for the council, let's put it that way. Anyway, let's not dwell on that. I think you know our view on Faraday Road and and why we want to see that reopened. You know our view on the the unsuitable site in Wash Common for all sorts of reasons. So we strongly support the action that the executive appears to be about to take. Thank you very much.
Leader, I would like to make a point of order, if I may.
Under what part of the Constitution, Councillor Vickers?
I don't have the Constitution in front of me, I'm afraid, but it is in relation to what Councillor McKinnon said in his so-called question, where he implied that this party, the administration's party, helped to fund the court case by Mr. Pierce. That's not the first time he's made that accusation.
In fairness, I think he said a Lib Dem councillor, not the administration. I think
member. It was leader member.
Statement from Councillor McKinnon.
I didn't hear the word member. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
I'll withdraw that.
Okay, thank you. I'm coming to Councillor Wollaston next. Is the shadow portfolio holder, and then Councillor Abbs.
Thank you, Leader. I'm sure it won't come as a great surprise that I don't agree with this report. I spent nearly 3 years trying to find a really good solution for the provision of a playing pitch, stands, floodlights and a clubhouse to step 4 level. I think there's a real shame to the residents of West Berkshire that political vindictiveness is likely to kill off the opportunity of Newbury Football Club to have a proper home ground and to provide playing time for up to 80 hours a week for community sport. In exchange, we had a grass pitch in Faraday Road, playable for a maximum of 6 hours a week, and more probably 2, with no facilities or parking. The Sports Hub scheme depends on its viability on having the clubhouse to provide income. It provides 4 changing rooms for child safeguarding reasons and would have been a proud addition to our sports capabilities, and as such was the #1 priority of the playing pitch strategy. The demand for pitches is at an all-time high, with 59 of our local teams having to go out of West Berkshire to play. I urge the executive to reject this report and push forward with the scheme. Newbury Football Club could be playing their games there for the 2024-25 season if you do.
Okay, thank you for your comments, Councillor Wollaston. I don't think there was a question there that needed a response to. I think it was more of
Are you prepared to reject the report?
I will see which way my members vote shortly. I'm sure the proposer and seconder will be voting in favour, as will I. And we'll see how the rest of the vote goes. Councillor Abbs, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Now, Councillor McKinnon didn't name me, but it's on the public record that I made a donation to which the intent was to help fund. But what Councillor McKinnon is incorrect in, none of that money was ever used whatsoever. So to keep making the statement is just not correct. And I wish he wouldn't keep making the same statement, which is not correct. It was given to football in general, as opposed to a specific court case. So let's be clear on this one.
Thanks for that clarity. Yeah.
Okay. In terms of the sports hub as would have been in my ward. So I'm speaking with my ward hat on, and having knocked on the door quite a lot, I can tell you that pretty much nobody in the ward wanted the extra traffic and all of the upheaval that would have come along with it. So it wasn't particularly popular within the ward. However, the rugby club is a significant thing for Newbury and for the area. And if there is a possibility of, an all-weather pitch there, it wouldn't be the overall thing that was discussed before, because it's just not appropriate. I think the report shows it's not appropriate, and therefore abandoning it as it was is absolutely the right thing to do. So if I'd still been on the other side, I would have absolutely been voting in favour of this report. However, the playing pitch strategy is still there, and we do need more football pitches. And in fact, an all-weather one of some kind there doesn't need the stadiums or changing rooms or anything else, because the rugby clubs have got those already. So I think there's definitely an option there that could still go forward. And I think then the people that live in the ward would be interested in something like that, because it wouldn't have the associated negatives. It would just have positives. So I hope you do vote in favour of the report. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Councillor Abbs. Councillor Culver, last comments with you, I believe. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Leader. Just wearing my hat as chair of the Scrutiny Commission, thank you to the officers for providing the figures that we asked for at the commission meeting. I'm grateful for that. I did receive a letter today from Mr. Pearce's barrister, and I've had a lot of ongoing correspondence with various parties around this issue. It will be on the agenda on the 28th of November for scrutiny, where we will look at what you've presented us with tonight. I do have concerns. I was on the Western Area Planning Committee and the District Planning Committee when this was discussed. I've gone back and I've reread the paperwork from that. I've reread the executive paperwork, court documentation, the playing pitch strategy, the Stage E review last year, and so on and so forth. And I do have grave concerns, and I think that we do, as an institution, have lessons to learn about this.
Okay, can I just pause you just there for 1 second, if I can, just for our officer, just to give a comment as well, thanks.
I should be absolutely clear that the process through the Western Planning has in no way been conducted in an unconstitutional way, and the planning application is not being withdrawn. The planning approval is not being withdrawn from this paper, and the judicial review process confirmed that the actions of the local authority at that time were in accordance with the law. That is not something that is being looked at or scrutinised today, and any paper that goes back to scrutiny is not part of this paper or the governance process.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I didn't say that it was unconstitutional. Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Mrs. Thomas, for that. Yeah, I didn't say it was unconstitutional, but I do have grave concerns, because when one looks at the timeline of the various documents that have come forward about this project, there are a lot of contradictions, and I think we need to learn those lessons. Some people think it was good value for money, some people don't. I'll leave that for others to judge. But bearing in mind that we do face financial challenges as a council, I think we do need to learn lessons about money and what we've spent. And also, I would just draw everyone's attention to the fact that many times I've heard the playing pitch strategy #1 priority being referred to as Monks Lane. The #1 priority in the playing pitch strategy is Faraday Road. So this is just one example of where I don't think the council is being entirely accurate, and it needs to be consistent in the language it uses and the way it refers to all of these things. So we will be discussing it again at scrutiny on the 28th of November, and we will take that opportunity to decide whether we want to do another piece of work on this. Thank you, Leader.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Councillor Culver. And we look forward to that debate at scrutiny. So no other comments. So proposed and seconded. So can I see those in favour from the executive, please? Thank you. That's carried. Sorry, Councillor Wollaston, your plea fell on deaf ears. Item number 9 is response to the council motion on the 20-mile-an-hour speed limits. Councillor Gaines, I believe you're going to propose this, please.
Yes, Leader, I'd like to propose this report.
Thank you. And does that have a seconder? Councillor Vickers.
Yes, Leader, am I allowed to reserve right and comment on any matters raised during the? Yes.
Yes, you are. Yeah.
Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you. So over to you, Councillor Gaines, to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Leader. So this motion was brought to the council in March of 2023 by Councillor Abbs while in opposition. I'm proposing that we do not implement the motion in its original form. However, I'm proposing the report in front of you. I believe we need to take the essence of this motion a number of recommendations that are proposed by which the council could introduce more 20-mile-per-hour speed limits and make improvements to the process by which speed limits generally are reviewed and changed by making changes to the approval process. So 5.2 is the original motion. And then we've got at 5.4, we've got some background information. So this is, we know as members that in the past, requests for speed limit reviews are quite time consuming, and they have advantages and they also have disadvantages. The advantages are that it goes through the proper process. The disadvantages are the speed in which we get speed limits actually to be in place. So those are the disadvantages. It's an elongated progress, and you can see at 5.12, the officers talk about what those implications are. And at 5.13, we have the current speed limit reviews takes longer than most stakeholders would like. Saying yes to individual applications actually makes some of the inconsistencies across the district. It also takes a lot of time and a lot of officer time to put that into place, and because of the legislative and constitutional processes that are actually in place. So some of the recommendations. So 5.17 gives the reasons why this motion is not really as viable as Councillor Abbs would have liked there originally. So 5.18 gives a new approach to the issues, and it talks about looking at speed limits holistically along the lines of the characteristics of that road, where it actually sits within the district, what sort of traffic is on those roads, et cetera, et cetera. So it talks about how to do it much more holistic way, and also in a way that actually we look at areas rather than actually just roads in isolation. So the recommendations are that a new criteria for 20-mile-per-hour speed limits zones are agreed with members over the course of the current financial year. Now, that's only going to be looking at one particular place at the moment. So this will go over the next several years, not necessarily all at once. So looking at the financial implications, because of the situation we find ourselves in, we couldn't implement this either through officer time or through the financial implications of doing everything at once. Following initial pilot system in Thiel, and the reason we've chosen Thiel is because of the sort of makeup of the town, where it's actually got a spine road going through Thiel, and then lots of smaller residential roads going off of that, and that actually makes it much easier to implement that 20-mile-per-hour zone rather than actually in isolation. We also are looking at considering changing the constitution in a slightly different way. If you look at the last recommendation on there, we're looking at changing the way we actually look at getting traffic orders going through the council. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gaines. Members of the executive, any comments or questions? Councillor McCrow.
Thank you. Yeah, I do welcome the selection of Thiel as a pilot. I did a couple of petitions to large areas of Thiel some time ago when there was overwhelming support for 20-mile-an-hour speed limits. The only comment I would make apart from that is we in Thiel regard it as a village, not as a town. Thank you.
Sorry. I beg your pardon. I beg your pardon.
In Thatcham, we have a similar view as well of our own town centre, at least anyway. You pop down the village. Any other questions from exec members? No. Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor Abbs first because it's in response to his motion. Then I'll come to Councillor McKinnon if he's got a comment as Leader of Opposition. Thank you. Adrian Abbs, Councillor Abbs.
Well, that's very nice of you. You don't need to change your order just for me. Thank you. Yeah, obviously I brought the motion forward, and in my head I was really thinking about schools and places where 20 miles per hour can lead to a safe outcome. So I'm glad to see some action to be taken. I guess having been campaigning quite a lot since January through May and talking to people about the motion they put in and so on and so forth, I think it evolved slightly, and it really comes out in my head that what people want is control. So whereas I totally accept uniformity is a great thing, it makes it very easy to implement and so on and so forth. I'm somewhat of a democratic person, so I kind of believe that if the people want something, as long as it's not completely silly, then they should be given it. And if they demand that their street, and they've got over 50% of the street saying, I want my street as 20 mile per hour or 30 mile an hour or whatever it happens to be, really, obviously not breaking the national speed limits, but within reason, then why wouldn't we give it to them? The holistic approach is great, but a local focused approach like Councillor Macro just mentioned that feel welcome 20 miles per hour, that's great news. There are other places that would want something, and all I ask of the administration is it works on its way to making what the people want accessible as quickly as possible.
Lovely. Thank you, Councillor Abbs. I'm sure Councillor Gaines will take that.
So you make a very good point, Councillor Abbs. Yes, one of the recommendations in this report is to actually ask residents what they wish. Sorry. Mr. Cole put his head in the way. Sorry, Mr. Goes. Sorry. Yeah. So yes, it's certainly something we're looking at doing. Is we wouldn't just implement a 20 mile per hour speed limit on, impose it on anywhere. It would always be with the agreement of the residents, or at least 50% of the more than 50% of the residents. Obviously, that would be something we would do definitely. Your point about the schools, however, yes, it would be great if we could actually just implement 20 miles per hour. But as we know, in our district, there are lots of schools that are actually not on roads that would welcome 20 miles per hour speed limits. We are looking at the flashing light signs, so where you actually implement it for a couple of hours, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, and that's possibly something we could actually do in some of the schools. And we're also looking at school streets as well, where we're safer streets with the safety the highway safety team, to looking at implementing that for things like places like Francis Bailey School. So.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I mean, thank you very much. The fact that we ask the people and we do what the people want, I think we can't do much better than that.
Thank you, Councillor Abbs. Councillor McKinnon, please.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, there's a lot to commend this report, actually. It's very well written and well put together. The criteria for assessing a road as being suitable for 20 miles an hour, I think, are particularly sensible. I think the report recognises correctly that there's no point in putting a 20 mile an hour or even any speed limit on a road which is just not going to be enforceable if it's not going to be accepted by the majority of the traffic on there, because the police don't really have the resources to conduct a great deal of extra enforcement. So my question was going to be quite similar to what Councillor Abbs just mentioned there about, would there be a chance of imposing, for want of a better word, a 20 mile an hour limit on residents who didn't want it? Although Councillor Gaines, I think, has answered that question in the negative. So I'm quite happy with that. And it seems like a pretty sensible response.
Thanks for your comments, Councillor McKinnon. Councillor Bowick, please, and then Councillor Wollaston.
Thank you, Leader.
Sorry, Councillor Marsh and Councillor.
Thank you, Leader. Like Councillor McKinnon, I think it's a good paper. I have some concerns about the tone. I'm a bit unsure whether I should be saying this. I'm afraid that Councillor Marsh is going to attack me again and suggest that I'm being absurd or even ridiculous. I just remind him actually that he had a chance to oppose us and he did that well. Now he needs to turn his attention to opposing the administration and not the Conservatives.
Councillor Bowick, sorry, yeah, you've got the floor.
Sorry, Councillor Gaines, I'm about to go into that, but I was a little distracted by the front bench there. Yes, my point is that well, I'll give an example. Where I live in Brimpton, if you ask the residents of Brimpton what they would want, they'd say they want pit drivers to drive to the speed limit, which is 30 miles an hour. In that case, imposing, if they did say they wanted 20 mile an hour speed limit, and as Councillor Abbs hopes it would be imposed upon them, then that would be of no value because cars are breaking the speed limit all the time. So I guess it's not a
less a question, more an observation that, you know, we need to be pragmatic and don't set the expectation that 20-mile-an-hour speed limits are the answer. And your point about flashing flashing lights at schools is a good one. We have them in Brimpton. It all happens there, you know. And we find them across the district. They're a good solution.
Thank you, Councillor.
Can I just
Please come back.
Just, yeah, because, basically, yes, 30 miles per hour speed limit people might do 35, 20 miles an hour, people do 25. People, if anybody does, we need those speed limits in place. I think basically we need to have speed limits. Sorry.
You're okay. You, Councillor Gaines was poorly earlier, so I think we'll leave it there, and you can follow up with Councillor Bowen in corridors.
There was no question. I know there was no question. Sorry. Coming back to what I was going to say, I take your point. We won't impose 20 miles per hour limits. What we were looking at is the characteristics of roads before we actually even start looking at them. So if a characteristic of a road is not suitable for 20 miles an hour, it will never get 20 miles an hour. But as you were saying about people speeding, yes, people do speed, but it tends not to be excessive. If you're doing 20 miles an hour, they may do 25, but it's a lot better than if they do in 35.
Yeah. So there's a relative.
It's relative. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Marsh and then Councillor Williston, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I think there are two issues in the paper, really. One is the 20 mile an hour, and the other one is the speed limit review process, which, as Councillor Gaines knows, I'm quite agitated about. On the general principle of establishing these criteria and doing them as a trial and then extending, we would broadly support that. I mean, the school streets has been a very good example of that, where it was done very thoroughly in Calcott, and now it's being extended to Thatcham and hopefully further as well. And that's gone very well, and it's a great scheme. And hopefully this could be something similar. And I know that Mr. Stacey, the officer concerned, has worked very hard on this, and I commend him for that. I think I'd just like to ask Councillor Gaines what she means about the schools. I think that the criteria, fine, work out the criteria, do it in Thiel, but I do think that schools should be an absolute priority. And at the moment, it's a bit hit and miss. So you've got 20 miles an hour limits in Love Lane near Trinity School and in Andover Road outside Park House School during certain hours. And they're main roads, they're main roads. Everyone accepts you drive at 20 or less during school times. And yet a road that isn't a main road, like Valley Road, where only a couple of weeks ago a pedestrian was knocked down and severely injured, and is right next door to John Rankin School, yet that is 30. I cannot see how hard it would be when it's got universal support locally on the issue of what people and Councillor Abbs, who represents the same ward, will confirm this, I'm sure. I cannot see how hard it would be to quickly set up 20 during school hours there, and indeed in Old Newtown Road, where, as members may recall, for some bizarre reason, the speed limit review process rejected a 20 mile an hour limit for that road right outside St John's School. And I think schools should be an absolute priority for this. Moving on to this, the speed limit review task group, it's not really fit for purpose at the moment for various reasons. And I would urge Councillor Gaines, please have a look at this as soon as possible. It's not true that it takes several months, as the report says, to get this through this process. It can take years. It took 2 years to get that 20 mile an hour limit outside Falkland and Park House School confirmed. I've had a request in for over a year now to reduce the A339 outside two schools, Highwood Copse and St Gabriel's, from 50, which is an absolute nightmare. It's like trying to cross a motorway, to 40 or preferably 30. So that's not part of the 20 mile an hour thing, but it's part of the speed limit review process. And it should not have taken more than a year for us even to consider that. Nobody knows who's supposed to be on it, this group. Nobody knows how often it's supposed to meet or whether how responsive it should be to the public, to requests from the public. And it shouldn't be hard, I would have thought, and to organize that in such a way that it can be consistent, respond to the public and to members. If more resources are needed, and just my final point, I've referred to the officers in that department who do an extremely good job in my view. But if you talk to them and find out how many people they had a few years ago before the austerity cuts, and how many they've got now, they are very stretched, especially with your ambitions, many of which we share, most of which we share. To improve road safety and bring in other measures. So, I mean, we managed to get, you will recall, with the Conservative support, thank you very much, Councillor Burke, we managed to get an extra officer into the budget this year, although it was at the expense of the job of the person who was supposed to be managing the sports hub at Monks Lane, ironically. We were right about that. That job was not necessary. So we managed to get that extra officer into the budget. I hope that you'll look at that because I know times are hard in terms of
okay,
finances.
if we can summarise, Councillor Marshall,
it's those two things: consistency on the 20, and also reforming the speed limit review. Thank you, Councillor Gaines.
Thank you. I'm glad you summarised that, Councillor Marshall, because I actually did there were an awful lot of questions in there. Yes, I appreciate that the speed review panel is very, very cumbersome at the moment, and it hasn't met since we actually started the new administration. It mainly because we're actually looking at a better way of doing that, as one of the items in the report says. Some of the reasons for the speed review panel time taken in the past has been because of the legislative traffic orders, and also the constitutional thing about coming back to executive and then going backwards and forwards to different things. So we're looking at that process, and that process will hopefully make it much easier to do that. And instead of actually maybe, as I said, looking at maybe things in isolation, we're looking at characteristics of roads rather than actually, is this road suitable or not? It's whether that road has the characteristics that would meet the 20-mile-per-hour speed limit or the 30-mile-per-hour speed limit, whichever one that a member's asking for. So yes, it does need reviewing. And that's one of the things, as you know, we are actually looking at, and we discussed that at TAG in the not today, but the last meeting. So it is in progress. On the question of schools, obviously, I can't comment on individual and previous decisions that are made. However, I do think that we could start looking at putting those flashing lights that Councillor Buick actually mentioned in outside schools. It's a very good deterrent for vehicles. When they see that flashing light, it is a reminder that actually they're coming up to a school. So again, that's possibly something we can do. But as you've quite rightly say, finances are finite, and so there's only so much to go around, and it's just a question of how we spend that.
Thank you, Councillor Gaines. And then we've got Councillor Wollaston and then Councillor Culver.
Thank you, Leader. You will be pleased and possibly surprised. I am actually welcome this report. I represent Lambourne, as most people know, and I've been asking for 20-mile-an-hour speed limits in the High Street and in Eastbury Village for 4 years now. So I say I welcome it. Could Lambourne be right at the top, please?
As long as the horses don't break the speed limit rather than the cars. Thank you. Councillor Culver, to you, please.
Thank you, Leader. And yeah, I'll put a bid in for the villages in my ward to be up the top of that list as well. Yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting. Speeding is probably the thing that I get the most complaints about now. It used to be potholes, now it's speeding. And it is very frustrating to have to explain to residents how different it is. They point out Oxfordshire, for example, that have got an £8 million project over the next 4 years to introduce 20-mile-an-hour limits into the villages. And it's quite an easy and straightforward process there to do that. And I know that some people have been critical and said they haven't done their traffic regulation orders properly. You know, we could argue the toss about that. but nevertheless, it is a lot easier to get action there. And I know that in some of my villages, they've had terrible problems. West Ilsley, for example, there's a property there that's been crashed into 3 times and structural damage has been caused to the house, which you're probably aware of, Councillor Gaines. And we have gone to the expense of buying speed indicator devices and vehicle activated signs. It strikes me when we're short of money, and I know we are because we've only got £30,000 a year for this, it's probably not a very good use of our money to be bidding through the members' community bids for these signs when we could do things in a much more organised fashion and make it a bit easier for people to get these 20-mile-an-hour zones. I appreciate what's been said about, you could have a mishmash and people could get confused, but I don't think there would be confusion in the rural villages where there's literally 2-3 roads going in and out of the village, and it would be very easy to have a 20-mile-an-hour like it is in East Ilsley. I think we could do it tomorrow in West Ilsley and in Hampstead Norreys and in parts of Compton as well, just based on the kind of data that we've been gathering with those machines. We rely on volunteers. It's cost a lot of money and we still haven't got anywhere. And it's just really frustrating every day I get a new complaint from somebody and I have to go back through all the arguments again. And they say, well, they're doing this in Oxfordshire. Why can't we? So I welcome this. I welcome the fact that you want to look at the speed review panel because I don't think it's fit for purpose. But I would just, urge that we try and inject a bit more speed into this, if that's not the right phrase to use. Thank you.
Oh, gosh. Thank you, Councillor Culver. Yes, I mean, I know that you're actually actively involved in the community speed watch, and that's commendable. And I know we actually, but the other day when we had that meeting, it was interesting to see the number of parishes actually involved in that. I think we've got to make sure that we don't do a blanket 20 miles per hour speed across the district. We know that it's deeply unpopular in Wales, and that it's caused an awful lot of issues in Wales where people have actually uprooted signs and sort of thrown signs in gardens, etc. So as a blanket change, it wouldn't be right and it wouldn't be fit for purpose. But one of the things that you'll notice in this report is that back at the financial area, the top of the report, it tells you that actually the cost of some of putting 20 mile per hour speed limits into places. So I'd love to be able to say to you, yes, we'll go ahead and put 20 miles per hour speed limits in East Ilsley. I can't do that at the moment. We're looking at this pilot. That will give us an idea of how much it actually is going to cost to put speed limits in areas. It will also give us an idea of the cost of actually doing consultations and getting the buying of residents before we actually start rolling it out across the district. But I note your requirements for 20 miles per hour. I'll note other areas as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I bring in Councillor Vickers, who seconded this, and don't think you got anything else to add.
Leader, thank you. I mean, I think Councillor Gaines has answered every question that's been raised admirably, so I don't think I need to say anything more.
Okay, thank you. So before I go to the vote, just to say it is quite clear that there is widespread support for this amongst members of the council, sort of en bloc. There are clearly issues around enforcement, as Councillor Bowick pointed out as well. I think what I would ask is for all members who are interested to engage with Councillor Gaines through the Transport Advisory Group to make sure that any ideas you've got are fed in, as we're developing this out. So it's worked up cross council in effect. Thank you. Executive members, can I see a show of hands of those in favour? Thank you. That's carried. Okay, good debate. Item 10, contracts for award under delegated authority from the executive. Councillor Brooks, are you going to move this report?
Happy to move it, Leader.
Thank you. And does that find a seconder? Thank you, Councillor McCrow. Back to you, Councillor Brooks.
Thank you very much. As members will know, executive is required to look forward to contracts that are likely to be let in the next quarter with a value of £2.5 million plus. This is one such. The supported living contract. It's had a procurement strategy approved by Procurement Board. It will follow the council's contract rules for tendering and award approval. And I draw your attention to page 176 and give some assurance. One, Councillor Bowick, I've looked at this and there aren't any spelling errors I can see. And we were a bit discomforted earlier about your comments. I remember Jeff Beck being an absolute are a person who sat here and checked all of your reports, and many's the time Councillor Burke found lots of errors in them. So not peculiar to us, I feel sure. However, having given you assurance on that, let me give you assurance that following the completion of the tender process, the service area will be required to submit a contractable report to procurement board. And you'll remember earlier I said I attend that. So that will come there for approval. The service lead and service director will consult with portfolio holders, the section 1.1 officer and monitoring officer prior to contract award. So just by delegating the authority here to the head of director, we are not losing sight of this award. I think also, Leader, I'll finish by saying the table on page 176 is very informative in terms of the way we'll go to market on this. It's an expensive, well, it's a large 10-year based award. We bring it to the attention of executive and give assurance that we know the path it will take to give best value for the authority. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Before I ask other members, just to note the voting will take place in the part 2 section of this meeting, and the decision will be on our website within 5 days. Any other comments or questions from executive members? No. So our officer's just going to update you. Thanks.
Apologies, I've just noted in the recommendation, you have covered it off in your introduction that the recommendation should include in consultation with the monitoring officer, chief executive and 151 officer at 173, just so it's clear what the executive is being asked to approve.
So in fact, I think it's 4.5. A lot of that should be also replicated in 2.1. If Nikki is happy with that, that will be an adapted recommendation, but it's in the paperwork. It just needs to be in the right place. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Good. Members opposite, any comments or questions? Councillor McKinnon?
Yeah, it's more of a process point here, and it's something that's really only struck me since I've been on this side of the chamber, is that it's very difficult for us to add meaningful comment to this because we don't have sight of what the procurement board's doing. When I was when we were in administration, I was obviously exec member for finance, and I was on the procurement board, so I sort of saw all of this stuff, and now Councillor Brooks is obviously in a similar position right now. So I know there's a bit more detail in the part 2, and we can't talk about that, but there's not a lot more detail. So it's more of I hope the executive have looked into it because it's them that are voting on it. We're not voting on it here, but there's a reason why this has to be approved by executive because of the size of it. So I hope you've all had a chance to review it and have a look into how the procurement was done, because we on this side are not really in a position to scrutinise it very well.
Okay, thanks for that comment, Councillor McKinnon. I'm happy to take away a wider conversation with you just on the role that the opposition members play in doing that part of scrutiny as well. Thanks. Councillor Brooks.
I thank you, Leader, and that's appropriate. I give Councillor McKinnon assurance that part of my professional background is assisting companies in bidding to public sector. So I've got a lot of skin in this. But your point's well made. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, Councillor McKinnon? No.
No, sorry, thanks.
Any other members? No. Okay, and then we'll take the vote in part 2 on this paper. Thank you. Okay, so we move on to item 11, which is the night warden service. Councillor McRae, will you be proposing this? Thank you. And the seconder, Councillor Gawley. Thank you. And over to you then, please, Councillor McRae, to introduce the report.
Yeah, it's not a very pleasant thing to do, to close a service to our residents. However, this is a very expensive service. It costs something around £130,000 a year and only supports a few adult social care clients. The maximum number of clients that it can support is only 8. As the report says, there are alternative ways of supporting these clients in a more cost-effective manner. And the latest news that I have is there's now no longer any clients using the service. They're all being supported in other ways. So decommissioning the service will now not have any effect on any ASC clients. The Night warden team is a small one, 4 members. It's difficult to cover the service if a team member is off sick or on holiday. Members of the reablement team are then asked to deputise, which relies on their goodwill and also affects the reablement service itself. The number of staff on the night warden team has dwindled, and it's hoped that the remaining members will be able to take up an alternative role in either the reablement team or one of our care homes. So I'm asking the executive to support this proposal in part 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCrow. Any other comments or questions from executive members? No. And again, just to note, voting will take place in part 2 of this meeting. So I come across the other side, Councillor McKinnon and then Councillor Bowick.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor McCrow, you said there's no service users using the service now. Is that a very recent update in the last few days? Because the report would seem to indicate that there are some still using the service.
That was the information I was provided with today.
Okay. I think I know that Councillor Bowick's going to ask a question about how sustainable that is, but my question is on the consultation. So the report says that staff from the service were consulted and also from the wider reablement service were consulted and no comments were received. And only one reply was received from a service user, and that user was pleading with you not to stop the service, but you're going ahead anyway. So are you happy that that consultation is sufficient? Because it doesn't look very satisfactory to me.
I am happy, yes.
No replies from staff?
Well, there were, the team had dwindled to just 4 members. Well, the team was only 4 members at maximum. It was down to 3. The number of active users of the service had also dwindled. So to get so little responses is not that great a surprise.
I'm amazed to hear you say that, but there it is.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions, Councillor McKinnon?
Not from me, thanks.
No, lovely, thank you. Councillor Bowick.
Thank you, Edith. Thank you, Councillor Macro. I completely understand the situation that the council's in here. A very expensive service being used by a small, indeed no, clients. I guess I understand your intent and ambition to save that cost. What will happen when and if clients come along for whom that night warden service would have been essential, whose needs can't be met any other way? Because I know in these cases, individual needs differ from one client to another. How will you reinstate a night warden service if it becomes necessary?
Well, if in the report it does mention several different ways that these needs can be met, but in one way would be these clients are using other services during the day, that usually from outside agencies, and so an extra call could be made late in the evening, for example. There's also issues like technology can help in some cases. Also, things like a lot of the requirements were things like changing pads, and there's now much more capacity pads that need to change them, and not so frequent, it's not so often. So there is a variety of ways, as it says in the report, of catering for these needs.
Thank you. Councillor Bowick, any other questions? No, thank you. Any other comments from members opposite? No, okay. And I said the vote for this will take place in part 2. So we move on then to item 12, which is the property investment strategy review. Councillor Cottenham, are you going to propose that?
I am.
Thank you. And does that find a seconder in Councillor Brooks? It does. Excellent. Over to you, Councillor Cottenham.
Thank you very much, Leader. So the primary purpose of bringing this report to the executive for approval is in reality to reduce our financial risk exposure. And what I mean by that is we've heard this evening many speakers talk about the current finances of the council, how at the current forecast is an overspend of 6.3 million, and the fact that our general fund is standing at only 7.2 million. So we have spoken previously in this chamber about the various levers we have undertaken to balance the books this year. So the Financial Review Panel looking at other aspects regarding our capital expenditure, specifically the MRP. And this one really is one of the other levers which we're looking at regarding our capital property investment strategy. And what I mean by that is that as we know, we borrowed a significant amount of money around about 4 to 5 years ago. We're very fortunate at the time to actually borrow that money at a weighted average of roughly 2.5%. And currently, we're getting round about £1.2 million worth of additional revenue compared to the interest which we're paying against the actual rental income we're receiving. We are fortunate that we have 100% occupancy of our property, and we're getting 100% of the revenues rent which we're due on those properties. However, as we know, with the economy and ourselves are facing financial difficulty, and if that particular rental income was to fall to the average which for this particular sector, which Montagu Evans have highlighted to us, of roughly 70%, immediately overnight we would be losing £1 million. And in conjunction with the need to have a maintenance and enhancement on our property assets of at least 2.3 million over the next 10 years, we would be effectively breaking even. So by divesting this particular property portfolio, we will be able to use the capital receipts, as I said earlier, at 2.5% weighted average, compared to going to the market of the Public Works Loan Board of 5.7 million. So in fact, we will be saving money from the interest which we would be paying by borrowing money today, which we in fact borrowed 4 or 5 years ago. Any loss on disposal, also from an accounting perspective, does not have any impact on the general fund. So in reality, there is only upside, in my view, in divesting and selling the assets which we own. And crucially, from a governance perspective, the Prudential Code and the Treasury both give the indication that this is no longer allowable. And I would like to quote, using another quote, that the government has been very, very clear that local authorities should not take excessive risk with taxpayers' money. And I believe that this is a risk which we should divest from, hence us wanting to, as I say, divest our property portfolio.
Thank you. And Councillor Brooks, are you going to reserve your right?
Can I come back after comments?
Can you reserve your right?
Yes,
Yeah,
I will
thank you.
do so then. Thank you.
So questions or comments from exec members? No. Okay. Councillor McKinnon, ready and waiting there this time.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Now, I know you like questions and debate. I've got a few questions and debating points here. The portfolio was established in 2018 by the previous administration, but one before my time, with strong Lib Dem support, I might add, to generate income to support the council budget. Now, I'm sure that Councillor Marsh is shortly going to tell us that we should never have done this and that we should have invested in West Berkshire instead. I can see the back of his head nodding. Well, once again, he'll be missing the point that this was a purely commercial investment, which did not prevent any investment in West Berkshire. It does not prevent any investment in West Berkshire. And in fact, by generating 1.3 million net revenue for the budget, increases the capacity of the council to invest in West Berkshire. Now, the logic of the proposal that Councillor Cottingham has put forward is understandable. The portfolio is funded with £62 million of PWLB loans at a very cheap fixed rate. And by selling, as Councillor Cottingham has mentioned, by selling those assets, you create a capital receipt, which can be used to fund the capital programme, preventing the need to borrow at today's higher rates. Okay, no argument on that logic, really. But there's a couple of major problems here. Councillor Cottingham, you're planning on selling when capital values are at their lowest since the portfolio was established. You'd be locking in a loss of 11 million on the total loan of 62 million. You mentioned there's only upside here, and you referenced the accounting treatment of that. I'm sorry, Councillor Cottingham, I cannot have that. That is madness. You're doing a Gordon Brown here. You're selling all of our gold at the bottom of the market. It'd be far better to wait until the market recovers if you want to dispose of it. Secondly, and I need you to have a look at this, and Mr. Holmes, I need you to have a look at this as well. The numbers in the table don't seem right. I'm looking at the table in the paragraph at 7.3. And it says the capital financing savings from not having to borrow £51 million, eventually the 6.9 million a year. That's an interest rate of 13.4%. Right now, the PWRB rates at the moment are 5.7. And at paragraph 5.4, it says that releasing 1 million of capital receipts avoids capital financing costs of 75.5. Well, that's 7.5%. I guess the difference is MRP. But even then, how can those figures be right in that table? You can't be saving 6.9 million in financing costs on loans of £51 million. I want to come back, but can you explain that one to me, please, first?
Yeah, I was going to say, let's take a pause there, Councillor McKinnon.
Right, I will answer the first question. So what we're proposing is not a fire sale. We're not going to be disposing all of the assets at once. We will take a structured view with the advice from our advisors, Montague Evans. We have identified potential asset to sell first of all. As you're well aware, the fact that potentially this capital receipt can then be used with regarding transformation. So part of our strategy of reducing the budget deficit, the fact that we have been told that we can potentially identify between £2 to £3 million, which will then alleviate the deficit which we're projected to this year. So to answer your question, Mr. McKinnon, we're not proposing to sell all the assets now. So at the moment, the paper shows the book value, the paper value. What we receive may be totally different on the open market. So as if you put a house up for sale as a list price, if you generate enough interest, you potentially can get more. And there are other opportunities which we can do with the lease, which makes the assets more attractive to the person potentially purchasing. So as I say, this is just a snapshot of what the value of the asset is in this paper. So I would hope we would receive more than what's been listed in the paper. And if not, we're not going to sell at any price. We will endeavour to get best value. So as you said earlier, over the lifetime of this particular investment strategy, we've made probably £5 to £6 million. And as I say, going forward, the savings on interest will hopefully more than clear any loss of sale, which we would have on it from a cash flow perspective. And as I say, this assumes a 100% retention of rental income. As we know, some of the assets within the portfolio have potentially more risky than others. Okay,
and then
I'll come back to that, but the interest costs.
Second question, regarding, I think I need to come back to you to understand, as I say, to come back on those figures. Okay.
Councillor Cottingham.
I think Councillor McKinnon, Mr. Holmes is going to.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Councillor McKinnon. Yeah, so on that, in the table, as it sort of sets out and in the paragraph above, the MRP amounts is the cumulative amount over the 3 years, and the table below then has the net figure of 1.3 million each year. So I suppose to do apples and apples, it's 6.9 million against 3.9 million over the period of the MTFS.
Well, Joseph, the paragraph says the capital financing savings over the term of the MTFS would equate to 6.9 million annually, inclusive of MRP.
Okay, sorry, it's cumulative in the table below. I'll take your point there.
But this is really important because the executive are going to vote on this based on these numbers. But I think that bit's actually right, because what that table's doing, so in the first year, was it 24-25, it's assuming you sell 16.5 million. Then the next year, 19.828. Then the next year, the rest of it. So the savings would accumulate and actually would be 6.9 million annually from 26-27 onwards. My question is, how on earth can you be saving 6.9 million annually when the balance is only 51 million?
Mr. Holmes?
I think I have to take that offline, Chairman.
Okay, hard to follow it on tables and debate.
Well, it is, and I appreciate that. However, the executive are being asked to vote on this tonight, now. So unless we get an answer to it by the time we go into part 2, you're going to be voting on something you don't understand, and I don't see how those numbers can be right.
Okay,
that's something to think about.
It's going to come back in there,
So
Councillor
what
McKinnon.
executive are voting on this evening is in principle having the strategy to divest. Later on, we're identifying a particular asset to divest. It's not all of the assets to divest.
Councillor Cottingham, surely the principle of whether to divest is based largely on the financial impact of that divestment. You cannot tell me that's not right. Maybe come back to it in part two, but this is not good at all. But
Further questions, Councillor McKinnon?
I do. I mean, I think you're going to have to pull this, but assuming you don't, when I read the paper, and Councillor Cottingham, you just alluded to this, when I read this paper, I could not believe what I was seeing. Not because of the logic of it, which I've told you already is fine. But what you've done is, putting this in part one, is signal to the market and the world that you need to sell these properties. And by including the financial projections at 51 million, what you've done is signal to the market and the world what you expect to receive for those sales. Do you have any concept, Councillor Cottingham, what a catastrophically bad idea that is? You have made sure that the chances of receiving a single penny more than £51.4 million are absolute zero. That you did not have to do this. PIB have got the authority to explore disposals, do the deal, agree the terms, and then it comes back to executive for approval. I cannot imagine anything more commercially inept than what you've published in this paper for the whole world to see. And I just think you've almost certainly cost the residents of West Berkshire millions in capital receipts. I'm absolutely stunned by that. Why did you do it this way?
I would be, you'd be unsurprised. I beg totally to differ. So these particular assets are valuations by a third party independent. These numbers will be easily accessible over the internet. As you're well aware, there are companies out there who will value commercial property. This is just an indicator. We're endeavouring to be transparent over the fact that this is the current valuation which we've received. It's just, as I said, a paper valuation. It's not going to be the sales price. Any particular person selling their own property can see what the value is. It doesn't mean that's the value which you then receive on disposal. I would repeat, as a council, our business is not to be a buy-to-let landlord, and this is the strategy which previously the council had, and this is why we want to divest, to reduce our risk and make sure that we're getting best value for the residents of West Berkshire. And I believe to be in a risky business of arbitraging the rent against the interest which we're paying against, as you just quite alluded to, with potentially having assets we may go up and down in value, isn't really the business of a local authority.
I didn't hear anything that answered my question about the fact that you have advertised to the market that you're going to sell.
Councillor McKinnon, he did, in fairness. I mean, I'm allowing debate here. I mean, he said that these aren't the sale price. These are a book value. And in a previous question, in fairness as well, Councillor Cottingham also did mention that we'll be looking at the lease terms to try to make them as valuable an asset as possible when we dispose of them. He did say that in a previous answer on this topic.
Okay, well, I'll finish with this then. If I'm a buyer, right, and I'm looking at this saying how much are West Berkshire going to accept, and you're voting tonight potentially on the principle based on these finances, I know you'll accept that. I know you'll accept it. There's no way I'd bid more than that. It's bananas.
Okay, and under every other previous administration, Councillor McKinnon, the values have been printed in the annual governance statement, which you've signed off as portfolio holder too.
Yeah, Leader, that's right, but we did not pass a strategy saying we want to sell with those numbers in them. That's a key difference.
Yeah, but the values were already part one anyway, Councillor McKinnon. We're just putting it into this report, so it's all in the same place. You allowed for the valuations to be publicised. So even if we had a strategy here now that said we were going to dispose of them, it wouldn't take them long to go to the governance paper to then find the values. We're just putting it all in one paper so that we're a bit more transparent and open. But thank you for the comment.
Hang on, just I'd like to come back on that one more time, please. You've introduced a new one. Those values are part of the financial justification for selling. The key point is that you should never have published this saying we want to sell our property.
Okay, we understand that's your message. That's not our view. And I think Councillor Cottenham has explained that we don't expect that to be the sale price either, but it's just a book value price to be able to populate the table. But thank you for your questions and comments. Any other members? Councillor Marsh first, please.
Thank you. I don't have a great deal to add to the points made on my behalf by Councillor McKinnon at the start of his questions. We opposed this before we were even on the council, and at every single budget meeting since we were elected, I have stood up there and said, we think these should be sold off. And the reason is, leaving aside the financial arguments that Councillor Cottingham has been through, we just feel that this is the wrong, this was the wrong way to invest this money. It happens that Granger spent about that same amount on building those flats next door. So the council could have done that. And because the government was allowing it to at the time, the council could have done that and had the rents from those 140 flats in perpetuity. Instead, we decided to invest the same amount on garages and supermarkets in far-flung parts of the country. It doesn't make any sense to the people of West Berkshire. We heard about social value was being talked about in the procurement strategy. There's no social value to West Berkshire in any of this investment. There's no real value to West Berkshire apart from a diminishing, as we've heard, rental income. And we say, delighted that the executive has come to the same conclusion as the Green Party did some years ago. There won't be a fire sale, but we get that, but sell them as soon as is sensible and economic to do so, and invest the money in West Berkshire. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh. Councillor Williston, please.
Thank you, Leader. The last 20 years of my career was spent in running a £10 billion asset management business in value, so I have some knowledge of this field. I totally get the rationale of disposing of assets to fund the council's capital programme. There's no dispute to that at all. However, I do question seriously the timing. As the consultants have pointed out, commercial property valuations are currently depressed for obvious reasons. However, today's announcement by the Bank of England to hold interest rates at 5.75% and the anticipation of headline inflation dropping below 5% for October does give some hope for a valuation bounce back. The original decision, I have to say I completely disagree with Councillor Marsh, to invest made total sense. With PWLB rates so low, it was possible to borrow the money and return the capital over 25 years, whilst generating over £1.2 million worth of net income to the council. As risk-free a portfolio as possible was purchased, which has been proven over COVID, Ukraine, and resultant oil price hikes, with currently full occupation and minimal rent arrears. The disposal rationale over the medium term is predicated on a need for capital expenditure and assumes that the PWLB rates will remain high. There is no point in giving away secure net income unless there is a specific project demand for finance at the historic low rates achieved. I would like to see clear timescales when capital will be required and to arrange disposals accordingly. Does the administration agree that this is the best chance of reducing capital losses to the taxpayers of West Berkshire?
Councillor Cottenham.
So I repeat, the process is not a fire sale. We're not recommending that all of the assets are going to be sold at once. We are very, very aware of getting value for money for the residents of West Berkshire. But I repeat, we have been, as I say, from a risk management perspective, this is one of the levers which we have in place to ensure we have a balanced budget for this current financial year. So we can go into the rights and wrongs of why we are facing this particular deficit. That is in the past. What I'm looking to do is manage the future. And I hear Councillor Wilson's point over making sure that we have due process, we have the checks and balances in place. And yes, I know he's part of the committee, which will be looking into this going forward with our external advisors, Montague Evans. So yes, we will, as I say, make sure that the appropriate governance is in place, that we do maximise the returns for the residents of West Berkshire when we do come to sell the assets.
Okay, thank you. And then I go to Councillor Abbs, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was a difficult decision, I'm sure, to to try and say, I'm going to dispose of all these assets. But for me, when I look back at what actually happened here, we had a set of advisors that said, go buy these assets at a time when money was really, really cheap. This is all known. It's all great. Those same advisors then make sure we get the run, and are now the same advisors that are going to sell the assets, or advisors on selling the assets. So the actually only real winner in all of this is Montague, because, and to be honest, if I had my way, I would have cancelled the contract a long time ago and saved the money. I don't think I should mention how much they're paid, but that's an
there's
option.
a part to
Yeah,
this debate.
indeed. But that aside, what we were looking at, and people have to keep this in mind, was a period in time when councils were all being encouraged to go out there and buy these assets. So in fact, councils, advised by the same people, were being told, why don't we all bid on that one property? And guess what happened to that one property? It got overvalued. So what a surprise that we're looking at a portfolio that's overvalued and is now going to be sold at a loss. But this is all stuff that's absolutely avoidable. I really hope the administration never gets back into this situation. If we've got some capital, go build a bigger solar farm. It will guarantee you income. We don't need to be worrying about, have I got a petrol station? Am I going to get the office full? And let's remember, the office has only recently become full. So saying it's 100% occupancy today, I'm afraid Ian is absolutely right. It could be half empty again tomorrow. You know, there are many more people going bankrupt now this year than have bid for many, many years. So you're absolutely right. If risk is way too high, for God's sake, let's get rid of it. We should have got rid of it a while ago.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Abbs. I don't think that requires a response, Councillor Cottenham, on that one. Any other comments from those who haven't spoken? Councillor Berwick.
Thank you, Leader. Really quick, I'd just like to remind everybody in the chamber that the Liberal Democrats supported the strategy to invest in commercial property right the way through.
I'm probably one of the only surviving members. Actually, I am from he was in the chamber there. And Alan, sorry. We had Billy as a councillor. We did vote in favour of that. But Councillor Boat, you might not recall, but I also, similar to what Councillor Marsh is now calling for, said we should be investing in social housing. I also asked for the chief executive to cancel the current deal that they had next door because we didn't have skin in the game for long-term income generation. So I did vote in favour of the property investment. Because of generating much needed revenue for the council. However, when you now look at the risk profile versus future borrowing rates, plus you look at the rental yield we've already received from those properties, when you add that all in together, actually it's not a loss for the taxpayer and it does de-risk this council. And so that's why I'm in favour now of disinvesting, as the strategy says. So no other comments from opposition colleagues. So I will now go to Councillor Brooks, who seconded and reserved his right.
Thank you, Leader. I'll take this in two parts. There's a philosophical part.
Sorry, the then chief exec, not the current chief exec.
Okay. There's two parts to this. One, the philosophical part, and Councillor Marsh has been very strident about this. The government dangled this in front of us. It's a cheap way to borrow and get some income. And at the time, it may have made sense. But frankly, apart from the money, which is interesting in itself, it did nothing for the residents of West Berkshire in the medium term, short medium term. Councillor Wollaston said, well, look, you know, interest rates are stabilised, perhaps. Inflation's coming down. Might save his government, he hopes, in a year's time or so. But he then says, so we can hope for a valuation bounce back. That's all you got. It's hope. And here we've got significant risk. For several years, you've had the benefit as an administration at the time of getting this money regularly. And apart from I think it was the base, you had full occupation. So you got all this money in, you used it for revenue. You don't seem to have put money aside against in what you call a sinking fund to repair some of these properties, and that's going to come and bite us if we don't start doing that. Even if we kept portfolio, it wouldn't be 1.3 million net because we'd have to make up that sinking fund, which you didn't put in place. You talk about selling it at its lowest point. Well, as you said, Leader, the income has allowed us, and you know, you were lucky, I think, but it's made the overall portfolio has washed its face, and even in taking a loss now, we will not take an actual loss. Let's get that out there in the public domain, because you're going to make a lot of us taking a loss on the property, but actually overall we will not have made a loss when we sell, and we're going to sell in a sensible way. Councillor Wollaston will be in the room when we make certain decisions, or we are given recommendations by Montague Evans. This is all about risk. And right now,
sorry, Councillor Brooks. So no, just Councillor McKinnon, I think, made a crazy signal to you. I just remind you, Councillor McKinnon, in terms of the mental health connotations of that type of signal, and ask you just to refrain from, in effect, making faces at the camera while members are speaking. Thank you.
Very difficult to listen to Councillor Brooks there talking about not crystallising the loss.
Back to you, Councillor Brooks. Thank you. Councillor McKinnon, you don't have the floor. Back to you, Councillor Brooks.
Is he indicating I'm a lunatic or something? I don't care. You know, it sounded, he must have thought it was funny. Let's move on. We need to get out of this over time. We need to get out of this portfolio and this type of risk out of time. Over time. It's getting more and more risky. Now is the time to start unwinding this, and this is the right thing to do. And frankly, Councillor McKinnon, you know, you've gone over the top, frankly, about, oh, we've indicated what we'll sell them for. We sold nothing at the moment, sir. Sold nothing at all. And the valuation is in the public domain year after year after year. So I think you're just over-egging that. It's rather synthetic astonishment that you're showing. So it certainly gets support from here. We should not have really gone into it. We are into it. Let's get out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And voting will take place in part 2 of the meeting. And the decision will be on the website in 5 days. Item 13, the future of West Street House. Councillor Cottenham, do I see a proposal from you?
You do.
Thank you. And Councillor Brooks, do I see a seconder and reserving your rights?
And reserving rights.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Cottenham, reduce the report, please.
Yes, so due to the success of the time load project back in July 2022 regarding flexible working, the need for both West Street House and I think WPH, which West Point House, wasn't needed regarding having our own staff working. So they then moved into Market Street. And the fact that obviously we've saved quite a significant amount of money by reallocating staff into one central point. But also importantly, from a green perspective, we reduced our energy costs by up to 40% as well. So this particular report outlines the opportunities which we have in place to, I suppose, optimize the asset which we have. We have 3 particular options. First of all, to open it up to market to sell the freehold for vacant possession. Secondly, we can in parallel, we can do a pre-app to potentially to demolish it and then redevelop. And if that doesn't work, we also could potentially do extend the freehold and redevelop with residential use. So, as I say, what we're endeavouring to do is optimise the asset value of this particular vacant building to reduce ongoing costs which we're incurring, which is roughly £250,000 per annum, which roughly 200,000 is the business rates which we have to pay to central government, roughly 75% of that. So even though we're paying to ourselves, roughly 150k goes to central government. I have.
Lovely, thank you. Any comments or questions from exec members? No. Councillor McKinnon?
Not from me this time, Leader. I'm going to leave that to my colleagues.
No, Councillor Wollaston then first, and then Councillor Abbs.
Thank you, Leader. For my sins, I spent 20 years of my working career as a partner of a property consultancy, where I specialised in office leasing and development consultancy. So while slightly rusty, I know a fair bit about this topic. West Street House is a tertiary office building in a poor location. We'll need huge amounts of expenditure to bring it up to what will be a legally lettable standard. In my judgment, a complete waste of council taxpayers' money. Residential is the obvious alternative land use, but now is probably not the best of times to sell. Best value for West Berkshire Council is likely to be found by a pre-app discussion securing planning consent for a residential scheme with reserved matters and detailed design and elevations left to the developer and demolition. By that stage, the residential property environment should have been significantly improved and best value achieved. I would ask if the administration is prepared to adopt this approach.
Thank you, Councillor Williston. Councillor Cottenham.
Nothing more to add to that, really. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Abbs.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I think there's an option missing. Unfortunately, I don't quite agree with Councillor Williston. I also have some experience in developing properties as well, in a different part of the UK. So I don't see it as a big deal to actually transform this into residential units. So one of the options is to basically convert and then sell. I think the option that's missing that I'd like to see in is to convert and keep. Because actually what we have more than anything else in West Berkshire is a dire shortage of affordable housing that we control and manage. And there are plenty of funds from government to help with that. We've got something going on in the background. So I don't think finding the money to do this is going to be that difficult. The second part of it is that once we start the process, and it's pretty much committed development to get going on this program, if we were to do something like change the double glazing, for instance, we would have made a significant start on the program, which would also increase its EPC rating, but simultaneously mean that we stop paying the bloody business rates to the government. Excuse my use of the word bloody there, but I don't like giving money to people who can't use it properly. So I would rather see us stop paying them completely, enter the fiscal holiday that would ensue in terms of rates while we finish the conversion, and then rent it out to the people that actually need it in West Berkshire. If we knock it down and rebuild it as residential, which is another one of the options in there, that delivers 27 units. The Richard Turner, the officer who's been looking at this for you, says that it's 32 units if we just convert what we've got. So I think there's a very valid way of taking this, very similar to the previous conversation we had about having the land next door to us and keeping the long-term revenue income. We've got an opportunity here. Yes, there'll be a little bit of money to spend. We get what we want. We keep it. We have the long-term income from the rent. And by the way, we get to keep the council tax as well.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Abbs. We will have a part 2 debate on this as well. Anybody else for comments in part 1 from opposition? No. Councillor Brooks, reserving your right.
Not a lot to add. I think it gives us plenty of flexibility in the recommendations, Leader, and happy to second.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. So that will stand adjourned until we go to part 2. Okay, we now move on to item 14, which is members' questions. We only have 3 questions that were submitted, and question B by Stephanie Stevenson. Councillor Stevenson, she has asked for a written response. So, Councillor McKinnon, it's your 2 questions, sir. So we go question A, first of all, and to be answered by Councillor Vickers.
Quite simply, yes, Councillor McKinnon. Have you a supplementary?
Given that clear and perfect answer, I do not.
Thank you very much. And then let's see if we can go for a roll here. Question C from Councillor McKinnon to be asked by Councillor answered by Councillor Gaines.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you for your question, Councillor McKinnon. I was delighted that both our Green and Labour colleagues supported the Liberal Democrat administration in our asylum seeker motion at Council recently. It was disappointing, but not particularly surprising, that our Conservative colleagues sat on their hands and abstained. I have nothing to apologise for. This was a very relevant and time-critical motion. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. I think this is really important. And how can you possibly think that passing a motion which contains a falsehood, knowing it's untrue, is fulfilling your responsibility to tell the truth to residents?
I have some statements here from the monitoring officer that actually stipulates that what we said in that motion was not what you said, a lie. It was not a lie.
Was it true?
Okay, that's the supplementary. You've had your supplementary question, Councillor McKinnon, as I'm sure you're aware. So that ends members' questions. Thank you. Yeah. So we move on then to item 15, which is exclusion of the press and public. So can I ask members to agree by voting that the press and public leave the room in accordance with Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972? So I'll propose that. Councillor Brooks will second. All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your evening, gentlemen. I'm going to just declare a 5-10 minute adjournment. So